And we're recording there. So, welcome back to The Good, the Bad, and the Orange. We have our favorite special guest today, Tina Tamboer. She is an icon, a legend, and was not a high school prom queen. But that's okay, because she's not. So, you know, it's, we all got together because in the marketplace, it's like we read every day, the market's going to crash. The market's going to crash, the market's going to crash. In fact, in Newsweek, Lawrence Yun, who I would put more confidence in than some of the other commentators out there, said, we are not going to have a crash. So when we talk to the public, they're all, you know, everyone has fear because, you know, that's human nature. In layman's terms, so not in, you know, our very sophisticated real estate jargon, why are we not going to have a crash?
Well, you need one thing in great abundance to have a crash in housing, and that is a seller in crisis. That's really the only thing.
Interesting.
If you have sellers in crisis that have zero options but to sell their home and sell it at a very low rate, low cost, then you will see property values decline. However, we do not have sellers in crisis, we have sellers inconvenienced.
That, you know, you should tweet that out, actually, because that sums it up. You know, everyone talks about all these other things. We don't have inventory, or we have high rates, or we have all these things. But really, if we look back to the last crash, it was when everyone's mortgages went through the roof, and people couldn't afford stuff, and they became sellers in crisis.
That's right.
And now we can't get people to sell because they got 2.5% mortgages, and they go, why would I sell unless
That's
I
right.
am dying or something?
And even if they want to sell, they're like, well, I just don't want to. I don't want to increase my mortgage payment, which makes complete sense. But they're not in crisis over it. They're just inconvenienced. Where I'm like, well, I guess we're gonna have to wait. We're gonna see what rates do. But in the meantime, I'm just gonna pay this really low payment that's less than rent for the same type of home, and I'm going to watch my values either stabilize or increase over the time, and nobody's freaking out about it. The only people who are freaking out about it are those people who want to invest in housing right now.
Well, that is very observant.
The industry.
Yeah,
the industry.
It was like, my favorite will be for probably the rest of my life is when Goldman Sachs went, we were going to crash like 2008. And we all kind of looked at each other and went, what? Where?
Yeah.
Who? Where? What decade are we in?
And that wasn't a long time ago, by the way.
No, that was
like
January, wasn't it?
6 months ago. Yeah. March. It was January through March. They were doubling down on that, 2008 style price crash. So there's two. When people say the market's going to crash, my first question, if I'm in front of them, is, are you talking about a crash in prices, or are you talking about a price in sales volume, like the number of transactions? So if you're talking about the number of transactions, then yeah, we've seen the number of completed sales drop down to 2009 levels, which for the industry is catastrophic because we have a lot of people here that build their careers on a certain number of sales every month. So that has been tough for the entire industry. But when it comes to, if they say it's going to be a price crash, then we're going to have a debate.
Yeah.
Because you need two things, not just demand, to predict a crash.
Right. Well, we also call that culling the herd when there's not enough transactions, which
happens,
in our industry seems to happen cyclically and needs to happen. It's like everyone got in when it was fog of mirror. Drag your cousin to a house, sell it, write the contract poorly. The good agents redo it for you. They close and get a check. Because that's what we do. We pull our hair out. Trying to understand why someone was selling when they just couldn't even pick up the phone. Remember those deals you'd call and say, "What's going on?" and no one would call you back. It was just, but they didn't have to. So we look at it. The other thing I saw was that rental. There was a warning to investors about rentals in the valley. So because pricing has now started to drop, or it leveled off. We watched that starting to drop because of this oversupply of rental properties. How do you think that plays into housing values? Do you think it has really nothing to do with it other than the investor side?
It won't have anything to do with housing values themselves, but it does affect the rental market, and I hesitate to say there's an oversupply of rentals. I will say there's an increased supply of
Right.
rentals that would cause those rates to come down. However, what we're seeing at least in the rentals within the MLS, which are heavy single family, we are seeing the asking prices drift down, but we're not seeing the actual rental prices start to show that the least number. That is still staying relatively stable for right now. However, the property managers that I have spoken to at the investor associations are expecting eventually that median rent to start coming down from 2,200 to something lower. However, there are many owners of rental properties that can sustain a rent decrease without
Right.
having any kind of a crisis amongst themselves. Yeah, so most of what I hear about crashing, they talk about the vacation rentals crashing, which that is a very difficult market to interpret. And the reason for that is that most of our analytics in resale, new homes, even long-term rentals move slowly, so we can kind of track and see, get a little bit of a heads up as to what's coming. The issue with vacation rentals is that you can have a vacation rental go on the market that could be a property that's not even owned by the person who is renting it out. It could be a tenant even, right? So you have this inventory that can flash high and then flash low over the course of a weekend, which makes that very difficult to track, in my opinion, any kind of crash, because I think what we saw during the Super Bowl was this unexpected influx of tenants renting out their apartment
Yeah.
for a weekend and then disappearing, coming back, and now I'm just a regular tenant now. You never knew what happened, but you saw this massive influx of supply, and all of the existing people who owned Airbnbs and VRBOs expected to have all these high rents and all of this high vacancy, and then they found out they had this rush of competition that came like a flash in the pan and then was gone.
I'm glad you explained that, because I remember that happening, and it was kind of like the fireworks that was a dud, because there's all this anticipation, and it didn't appear to happen. But I never thought about the tenant. It's no different than a homeowner going, I'm going to rent my house out for a weekend for big money and I'll come back. Well, you don't need to get permission for a weekend when it takes too long to get a hold of the landlord to say, is it okay if I sublease it? Because they would never even know.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden that skewed that market.
Absolutely.
And that data too, we rely so heavily on tax records, like you said, and armless. But the vacation rental stuff is the Wild West on
Yeah.
where those stats would even come from.
You don't even have to own any of the properties that you're technically renting out as a vacation rental. So that was a whole sub-business within the vacation rental industry that you cannot actually track, because in public record it's going to show up as a long-term rental.
Yeah.
But you might have a tenant that has multiple leases around town and they're all using it as a business opportunity. We bumped into those, haven't we, when we've tried to represent the buyers on the purchase of one of those, and you've got a tenant that's like, I'm sorry, we can't have any showings from here to here.
Yes,
And
I know. What about the 48 hours? No.
Yep, no 48 hours.
Not doing it.
Yeah, that's a key red flag, that you've got a tenant that's running a business there.
So Eric is our commercial guru. So we rely on, since he has gotten very active in our brokerage, I think I've learned, I know I've learned a lot about how to correlate that. There's so much misinformation on that as well. But I don't know, do you have any, how do you see this? You've been busy off the charts, right? And everyone goes, commercial's bad, but it hasn't been. And how do you think that correlates with everything that's going on?
Well, remember, commercial includes investment sales, but it also includes leasing. And there's a lot of leasing activity that happens annually, because leases renew and have to be renewed annually. So the leasing side of commercial is doing very well, especially in Arizona, in the retail markets, in the industrial markets, and even in the office markets, except for a big surplus of sublease space. Most of the sublease space out there is really big. It's not 1,000 square feet or 1,500 square feet. So your small office users aren't really benefiting from the excess sublease space that's out there right now. They're paying full market rents, and we have office buildings coming to market that are actually breaking rental records right now. So it's really hard to understand what's going on in the commercial markets in Arizona. You see pockets that are doing really well, and then you see some areas that maybe seem to be struggling because they have a lot of big users that have vacated that space. Out in Deer Valley, they have a lot of big users, the insurance companies that have kind of vacated big buildings, and that's what you're seeing on the market. But in terms of demand, investment sales is definitely way down. There's still a disconnect between what sellers think their property's worth and what buyers are willing to pay for it. And it's a math problem. That's a numbers thing.
Well, and there's also some new types of investments in the commercial leasing, which would be what we're tracking a little bit of, which is that build to rent type inventory. And what we call build to rent would be a single family complex that the whole purpose of the complex is structured to be like an apartment complex, but single family homes. They are now, we've been watching them and, you know, the beginnings of it, we've been watching this for a couple of years, and they're now coming online. And that's what a lot of our residential investors are stating as their main competition now in terms of rents, with that increased rental activity going into potentially the MLS as well.
Yeah.
Just, you know, bringing that overall line down.
Well, I remember Mike made a comment about that. I think it was Mike. About how the median price per foot dropped, and then he said, well, you just got to dig deep enough, and he said, well, that's because there was this huge sale of the rent-to-own houses at bulk rate, went into the stats, dropped it, I don't know, it was $10 a foot or some crazy number in 1 month, wasn't it, or something like that?
It was, and you know what's interesting is right after he posted that, I don't know if these are correlated yet, I still have to ask, so I'm just gonna throw it out there, but I was, before I went to speak at an investor meeting, they had a water presenter on. And apparently, as we've stated, you know, there's been a stay on some of these water certificates. And so this particular presenter stated that there was a new home subdivision that had partially, you know, built out, and they couldn't get their water certificate. And so what ended up happening is Invitation Homes, or large Wall Street investor came through and purchased the entire subdivision, because you don't need 100 years of water guaranteed for rentals. You only need 100 years of water. If you're going to sell to you or I, you've got to guarantee that us as a consumer need to have water. But if you're an investor, especially a Wall Street investor, they don't really care about you. You can lose money if you decide to take a risk on water.
That's an aha moment. That's a loophole.
Yes.
They probably need to look at. But that's interesting that happened.
Rich get richer.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you know, that's a risk that a lot of people don't want to take on. However, you're looking at areas that are growing, and I assume they took the risk. I'm not sure if it was in Buckeye or if it was in
Litchfield. Wasn't it Litchfield?
I'm not sure
I
exactly
thought there was
where
a
it
part
was.
of Buckeye, and then wasn't there a spot in Queen Creek, right, when they did that massive study, recent overlay of the two watersheds?
So there was one in the West Valley, though.
Yeah, I mean, they're everywhere. I mean, not everywhere, but, you know, in the areas that aren't serviced by city water, then you definitely want to make sure that you understand where your water's coming from, for sure. And that's a risk assessment that the government doesn't want us as normal consumers to have to make, but they're not going to worry about Invitation Homes.
Politics as usual. So luxury market, since we're up here in Scottsdale, DC Ranch Marketplace, Market Street. So we seem to be different, but do you see that? What do you see happening the rest of this year and into next year? Because we're starting to hit season. And overseeing the courses in a month, and so what do you see?
We're seeing still the third best season we've ever had for luxury sales, and when I say luxury sales, I am still going over $1 million even though if I'm up here in North Scottsdale, I might go 1.5 or maybe even over 2 to start saying what luxury real estate is. But for the product that is determined to be luxury, what you get in say Northern Peoria or Gilbert and Levine, you can get that same product many times for the low one millions. So with that, when we look at everything selling over $1 million, we are seeing record amounts for this time of year still, but we're about the third best. So 2021 and 2022 were better, but we're still right up there.
Well, that's saying a lot, cause actually those 2 years were in some ways anomalies. I mean, they weren't, but I mean, that wasn't typical. So really, you know, you think a third behind those is pretty powerful.
There are less anomalies, and that particular price range, especially when you get over 2 million, you're looking at 50% are cash, so they're not nearly as reliant on mortgage rates as some of the
Mortgage
other
of convenience,
ones.
maybe,
Yeah.
that's just about it.
Yeah.
So, we've got 2 secret agents in here, another hide behind. Janelle and Michelle both have luxury or over $1 million listings in other parts of the valley, and so, you know, one of the things I maybe get tunnel vision on is tracking where luxury has moved to. And so one thing, you know, when you talk about, you really can't get much for $2 million in North Scottsdale. And the demographics shift with, you know, the amount of tech growth. Where do you see that next horizon for luxury?
Well, you know, it's interesting because now you've got people who are in that price range who are work from home, so the convenience factor of having the commute is less of an issue, and maybe more of an issue might be just convenience to the airport or an airport, right? So you're looking at areas that we've seen grow in that price point are definitely East Mesa for sure, Northern Peoria, Northeastern Peoria. We've seen a lot of growth. Levine's doing all right, but I'd say that Gilbert and Chandler have started to come up. And so you're looking for areas that have those unique qualities like city light views, which means you're gonna have to be up in a hill, right?
Right.
So preserve, you know, anything off of, you know, South Mountain that you're getting the city light views. You've also got some nice elevated lots in the Peoria area. Or you're looking at large lots. If you like large lots, you might be looking at Mesa. You might be looking, of course, Mesa's got some nice city light views as well. But, you know, areas like Chandler and Gilbert might have some of those unique properties, such as, oh, you wanna have chickens? You wanna raise bees?
Yeah.
You're gonna be going, you know, you're gonna have those unique type personalities. I have a friend who raises bees, so I'm just saying.
Bees?
Bees, yes.
Well, they also have too, like the shopping and the restaurants, they have all those things, they're adding so many
Yeah.
like left and right. I was
They're
like,
developing, and when you look at where the freeway systems are going and where the infrastructure is being developed, you can gather that the luxury will follow at some point. But those are the areas we're looking at, the high density corridors for employment, but just off. But so there's some things that I look at for just in general, any area that's coming up, let alone luxury. You wanna know, can I get in and out of the area quickly and efficiently? How, you know, is there a freeway access? So we all saw Levine take off like crazy after the 202 was completed, and it took off with very nice homes and unique product lines as well. So you're looking for convenience. You wanna know, is it close to an employment center? Is it close to an entertainment district? So you've got Westgate, that's becoming, you know, it's had its ups and downs, but it's definitely becoming an area.
It is, yes.
And then you wanna know, is there open space? Is there a reserve where we can go hiking or walk our dogs and all of that stuff? And then finally, can I get to the airport in a reasonable amount of time? So those types of things, you're looking for not just for the rest of us, but in terms of attractive locations for high-end real estate.
Heather, what's your number one question today?
well, I think you kind of covered it about the crash versus correction.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so tired of hearing about it. It's like, and to your point, most luxury is cash. I mean,
Mhm.
most of my deals, it's all cash. Nobody
Yeah.
finances, all they care about is the stock market,
Yeah.
how their portfolio is doing. So I think you kind of touched on that, and, when we have the Robert Kiyosaki, talking about, everything's gonna crash, housing prices in Phoenix are gonna come down 16%. Just debunk them. How do we debunk all of the naysayers out there?
With math. I don't know how else to do it. You look to see, does the math support their prediction for Greater Phoenix, and that's something that we do have an advantage on the national prognosticators like Goldman Sachs, because Goldman Sachs came out with this, crash prediction, and there's nothing in our math that supports that.
Well, I try to always bring the job growth too, like all the industry that is coming here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we already have a housing shortage.
Yeah.
Now we already have all these people coming in. Where are they gonna live?
Yeah, well, and the thing is that a lot of times when the national predictors or economists are coming in and trying to predict for Phoenix, they're often using lagging indicators.
Case Schiller.
Yes, Case-Shiller is, as we've talked about before, it's always 2 months late by the time we've already lived through those months. Like the latest one came out, it was for June, and we've already lived through June and May and April, which is 3-month moving average. So the fact is that, maybe they're using outdated price, and plus the fact that price is not a predictor for future price. Okay, price is more of a result, it's not a predictor. Okay, so just because the price is going up doesn't mean it's gonna go forever or down forever, whichever direction it's going in. So you have to look at the math of where are we in supply? Is it higher or lower than what we normally would see for this time of year seasonally? And what is our demand? Is it higher or low for this time of year seasonally as well? And our seasons are not like the rest of the country,
No.
where they pick up in the summer and we're like, nobody wants to be here in the summer. So our season is more like coming into January through May,
Right.
whereas the rest of the seasons show up maybe around April through, say, maybe September.
Labor Day.
Yeah.
This triggered two things. So one thing that, we get agents who refer us from around the country who will, use their 20 years of experience there, which I respect, and try to analyze it, compare their market to Phoenix, which is, I think ours moves so quickly. I think that's one of the things is you at the Cromford Report have done, is you're pointing out how Case Schiller, there was a shift. Remember when they really became, I don't remember when that was, remember they came out with this prediction that was just like ridiculous. I think it was maybe just COVID or just before, and it was because it was so lagging. We were changing so quickly. How do you think we compare to other parts of the country generally? So we get a lot of people moving from other places, going, in my market, it's this, and we try to explain that to them. I mean, what's the phrase or the fact that we can give that says we're not your market? I mean, obviously.
Well, I mean, I think that, first of all, I'm not an expert on other markets,
Well, no,
like
I understand.
Chicago or just where but it's important to recognize that there are certain industries that drive the economies of certain major cities. So right now we're looking at potentially large strikes in the auto industry. That's gonna affect the economy and housing in that area. It's not necessarily gonna affect us.
Right.
And we have now diversified our industries to the point where we are gonna see some industries shrinking. We are gonna see some people getting laid off, say in tech, but then we also have other industries that are growing that might be able to pick those free agents, if you will.
Agents, I like that.
So the thing is that oftentimes when people look at Phoenix, they look back to 2008 and say, well, you did it once, we expect you to do it again. And one of my most irritating things that I've heard is where some people call Phoenix like the canary in the coal mine. Like they look at Phoenix and I hate that. I'm from Virginia. I'm from Virginia, and we all know what that means. Is everybody? I don't even know if millennials and Gen Zs know what that means, but it's
My dad was from West Virginia.
It's kind of morose, right? Like, oh, ew. Like, so if Phoenix dies, then the rest of us can just
We'll all die.
yeah,
great.
we're all gonna die. But that's not the case this time around. Back in the economy of Greater Phoenix was really reliant on retail, construction, real estate, and low-end paid call centers. I mean, it was not really diverse, and when one industry went up and down, everybody else went up and down with it. But that's just, since then, over the last, going on 13 years at least, the diversification in our employment base is what really helped us during COVID. And they all looked at Phoenix expecting us to trip and fall on our face, and we outperformed every other
Yeah,
city.
we were like a rocket. It was crazy.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, you know, you look at areas like regulation on taxes, different types of taxes, employment taxes, and just in general commercial type taxes that would attract companies here. The lack of disasters. I mean, other than fire, of course, is always an issue.
Haboob.
Yeah, haboobs, and you know, maybe some outlying areas could use a little more water security, but outside of that, we have very good water security here in the central areas. And the fact is that we don't necessarily have massive floods that are as destructive as the Midwest, tornadoes, mudslides, earthquakes. I mean, there's all kinds of things we just don't have. We have angry bees. We do have that.
Have you had any experience with angry bees that you can talk to?
I will take angry bees, scorpions, and rattlesnakes any day of the week over alligators, pythons,
Tornadoes.
tornadoes.
So I don't want to live in Florida.
Florida scares me. Florida's bugs scare me.
Yeah.
I mean, so
Humidity.
I always say crunchy grass and big bugs and humidity. I'm not
Everybody's-
getting, not even talking about hurricanes, but Florida to me, and that's okay. There's
But, I mean,
people that live there,
every state has their thing.
They do,
Okay,
yeah.
but the fact is that in Phoenix specifically, we are getting a lot more notice from the international communities,
Right.
which is something we have not had before, and they're seeing it as a positive thing. However, we do have a lot of things that need to be expanded, such as direct flights internationally, things like that, a little more first class seating, all of that.
Well, we
And
have the infrastructure and the capacity to do it. They just
we're
haven't
doing
done it
it.
yet.
Yeah, so that's the thing. We are a growing economy. We're not established. So when you start talking about people coming from, say, I don't know, Chicago or the Pacific Northwest or New York, you are seeing, per lagging data, by the way, through the
Yeah.
census, you're seeing migration out of those cities, which is going to have a different effect on their housing market than ours, which has had a consistency of inbound migration, whether that's really strong through work from home or whether it's weaker. Now, you know, coming into where we are, I think it is probably stabilizing, but overall, we're not seeing a decrease in our population.
No, not unlike our West Coast friends. I mean, you know, I've always thought it takes a long time for a trend to change. So you think about population growth and population's decreasing. When you go over that precipice, you can't in a year or two change that kind of migration out. And so what that does for us, if people are migrating from those areas, it says, well, if they've now moved the curve to declining, we're going to be increasing as a secondary benefit for a few years at least, because even if they change everything, people are going, I don't believe you because of the past, or they make a decision and they're done. How are we doing on time? We're good?
If we could have one more, because we were in the luxury realm
Yes.
up here, I have been hearing people talk about LA and San Francisco and what's happening with their luxury market. And one of the things that they have in the larger cities, such as, Florida, New York, all of those West Coast cities that are huge, is a lot of Chinese investment. And so the Chinese are notorious for purchasing housing units as a commodity. They're not gonna live in it, they're not gonna rent it out, nobody's gonna actually live in that place. And so if you remember, even in Canada, they started increasing their upfront taxes on international buyers because they were finding that they were buying up the units, weren't available for anybody to live in, not even tourists. It was locked out, and it was causing all of the property values around them to go up.
Artificially, yes.
So when you have what's going on in China right now, where they have those big old cities that are vacant, and now the value of that commodity is not considered as high, they're gonna try to find a way to recoup their losses, and it's very possible that and I'm not an expert on LA, but it's possible that some of them are listing their very high-end properties in LA, trying to get a buyer, and if that type of inventory increases, you're gonna see some, and if they're desperate enough, you have to have a desperate seller, and you have to
That's
have
right.
lots of them. If you have enough desperate Asian sellers of luxury real estate, you're gonna see an impact on the price.
Especially when it's a commodity,
Yeah.
because they just look at it as a write-off or whatever, or new opportunity for that money.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
very interesting.
So that's what we look for. We're like, who's going to be desperate as a seller and will sell at whatever cost they have to sell at, and that's one of the things that comes
There's
to
our
mind for
target
me.
market.
But that's the thing for me is that that's a theory. So
But I think it's pretty logical. That leads into something. This has got to be 6-7 years ago. I was talking to a newer agent, and she was Chinese, had moved from the West Coast, and she was trying to get her sphere, which was in China, to look at Phoenix.
Mhm.
And she said they didn't even know Arizona was a thing.
Yeah.
And they
You have
said
to
it's
say Grand Canyon.
yeah, well, yeah, that's still a drive, right? But yeah. So do you think though now with, of course, we have
Gaming is huge. That's
yes.
gonna be a huge draw to get them.
So Minneapolis, all we need to do is build a Mall of America too, and put it by the casinos, and they would flood in, because that's how it was in Minneapolis. But do you think that investment is going to move this way? I mean, so we've got Taiwan making huge investments.
Too.
Yeah, and so do you think we're going to see more Chinese investment or Asian investment?
That's something that
Part of your hypothesis?
I would say that's not an unreasonable expectation. I can't do any predictions on
No.
it, but
You're so safe.
of course.
The numbers aren't
We're
there.
recording
Yeah,
this,
that's
aren't
right.
we?
Yeah.
Relying on lagging data.
Tina back in 2023
She
said,
said, yes.
I think it's reasonable to expect, but what I'm seeing with Taiwan and those types of industries, especially the semiconductor industry and the electric batteries and
Yes.
all of those things, those are being fueled by government funding, government programs and incentives to bring those types of industries here. Now, whether that type of natural progression happens, I couldn't tell you. They have to get through, they still have to build their plant, they still have to attract their talent. I'd say it's probably a long-term expectation, but not anything I would expect in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, all I can say from our experience is it's interesting the inquiries we see. So we have a private Facebook group called Moving to Arizona, really original, but we're the original. But we're seeing more Asian people requesting to join, and they're, you kind of check out legit or not, and they're where they were living now, Glendale and other areas, so they're trying to figure out, they're moving here, obviously. I mean, they're starting to move
Absolutely, they're moving
those folks into work, and or maybe it's their management or leadership, I'm not sure, but I mean, it's something that we need to, it's easy for us to just get locked into our little tunnels of what we think the buyer's gonna look like, but I think that's the other thing, it's evolving, and in luxury too. I mean, there's an ever-changing marketplace, new wealth and younger wealth, and
Well, and disclaimer, I am the treasurer for the Asian Real Estate
I'm a member.
Association. And so, good for you, excellent choice. And they are working, ARIA is what they're known as. The Asian Real Estate Association is in pretty close working relationship with the Greater Phoenix Economic Council right now in trying to address some of the things in terms of support for the Taiwan Semiconductor project, if you will. So with that type of diversity coming into the northern Phoenix area, we are not very diverse in other things for them, say like restaurants. Not a lot of Asian restaurants, so through the connections of the Real Estate Association, they've been arranging for, new businesses to pop up that are more inclusive of the Asian cultures that are gonna be coming in there.
More Indian ones I've noticed too.
Indian as well, because, India is part of Asia,
Yeah.
so, that's the thing.
Well,
So, so the whole,
Kinda.
everything, yes. So, I mean, everything, but it's, on the Asian continent, so they are part of our organization as well, and, but Indian, Vietnamese, Korean, Chinese, and also in terms of just business owners that speak languages, and so a lot of those business owners have been helping them get referrals for doctors who are bilingual, healthcare, you've got childcare, all kinds of things that that are happening under the surface that we're really not as privy to. And so as those support services come in and get established, that would be an attraction.
That's something we don't think about, because we've always been a kind of a bilingual, so we've had Spanish and we've had English, but to think about setting up that whole network really for really an emerging population growth
And these are long-term plans, by the way.
Yeah.
These are not, we're dealing with our short-term issues within the industry in terms of how we are going to sustain ourselves through this period of time economically. But when you look at where Greater Phoenix is positioned for when we come out of this, we are positioned very, very well. And like I've said for many agents, just don't let your license expire. Go do what you have to do. Get a side gig if you have to. Don't find yourself having to go back and take the test again.
No kidding.
So-
We've got a few people who testify to that. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Michelle, do you have a question at all? You're sitting back here being quiet, and that's not your style.
No, she touched on, it's just really hard when you have people that are even in the financial world.
Yes.
They're really thinking opposite. I'm personally dealing with that now, where they're really believing that interest rates are not coming down.
Right.
That prices are gonna come down, and they're gonna end up buying a property that's, priced higher than what it's gonna be worth when it's completed.
Right.
And we're hearing the opposite, in the industry, they're feeling like we might see some interest rates coming down by first, second quarter
Right.
of next year, if you can add to that.
To the point, we have two camps of thought in the internet verse, if you will. And that is, are you on team recession or are you on team soft landing? Okay, so when I look at all of the predictions for mortgage rates, I see a lot of economists saying we think mortgage rates are going to stay high, and we see a lot of real estate professionals believing that real estate mortgage rates will come down. So the irony is that if you are on team soft landing and you believe we're going to get past all of this inflation without unemployment and without a recession, then you believe rates will stay high, because rates stay high when the economy is doing well, right? When they're not having a recession. So ironically, they are the optimists. The real estate industry, having gone through kind of a rough 18 months, we might add, we've already gone through our layoffs. We've already seen a significant number of people drop out of the industry already. If you believe you're on team recession, then in every recession, mortgage rates come down. We don't need a recession for rates to come down, just to be clear, but in every recession, they have come down, and then even after the recession is over, it has continued to decline. So the irony is that it's the real estate community that is the pessimists here. They are on team recession, they're on team we're gonna see rates come down, and all the economists are, practically trying to spike the ball, saying, hey, we've gotten through it, this is great, smooth sailing from here. And you've got, probably a good half and half of people, no wonder they're all confused. But if you're with the stock market, so when you start talking about the real estate market to a Wall Street professional, they're immediately gonna go to the stock price of like Opendoor or something, or they're gonna go to the stock price of the builders, or the stock price of any of the real estate related REITs or any of that. And if they're going down, then they believe the housing market's going down. But I'm telling you that whatever stock prices are doing in real estate related assets in Wall Street is not a indicator of what your home value is worth. It's an indicator of what's already happened, what they've already done, and then they reveal their spreadsheets to their investors, and then the judgments happen, right? But the fact is that stock market performance on real estate related assets is not an indicator for the housing market and your home value, frankly. And while I'm going on that direction, neither is apartment complexes. If apartment complexes and any of those rents start coming down, those are also not a predictor for your home value. Commercial's not a predictor for home value. So, you know, do you guys remember way back in the day, like, when Zillow came out in 2015 with their book, Zillow Talk? You know, like Pillow Talk, but Zillow Talk? You remember that? No, just me? Okay.
I don't remember.
I
seeing
don't
that.
either.
Oh my gosh,
heard
it
of
was, they got quoted across all the news outlets in 2015. It was like this big, so it was the perfect book for like the ADHD. It was very fast read, very big font. And so in there are data scientists who were, by the way, all in their 20s at the time and had never purchased a home, had put out this statement that homes within a mile of a Starbucks appreciated faster than homes that were not within a mile of Starbucks. As if your neighborhood was going down the toilet, don't worry, we'll just put a Starbucks in there and charge you $7 for a coffee. You're welcome.
How many
Right?
people bought a home because of that?
I know. Well, and over the years, we've seen kind of variations, like they've done it with like
Trader
Whole
Joe's.
Foods and Trader Joe's.
I did have 2 clients ask me that though. There's
Yeah.
gotta be a Trader Joe's nearby.
Because those homes will
Wow.
appreciate faster. And I'm sure as you can testify to, commercial follows residential.
Always.
So, case in point, I just heard that, I was at a movie theater doing a presentation, and the Harkins manager stated that Harkins is opening up their very first dinner theater up in Peoria, up by the lake up there. And I
5
thought,
years after everybody else. or-
right, I'm like, why are you going there? You're not gonna go in the central areas, like where, and they're like, no, that's where it's growing. And again, they
Forward
see the
thinking.
growth happening already, and they're following it that way. So so you could also, maybe if home values go up, everyone's gonna be like, well, it's clearly because of the Harkins dinner theater.
The revival of the dinner
Wow.
theater.
I would
Save
not
the real
use,
estate market.
do not use Harkins as an indicator.
I know.
They are not the economic indicator.
So, I mean, but a lot of
From a
what you
commercial
said.
expert, not from me.
Yeah, I'm gonna spend $2 million on my home, but dang it, I need to have a Trader Joe's, cause I will not spend more than $2 on
A
wine.
salad, yeah.
You know, is it $4?
Add a
$2 check.
Starbucks and it'll really be a bonus.
And the dinner theater, you know,
Yeah, right.
in case they don't have a theater in their home already.
That's right,
You know.
exactly.
I've got one last one on my list. So, you know, Scottsdale they've all come to this agreement that they're gonna give them a standpipe and haul water out in Rio Verde.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, you know, I'm not sure that the long-term effects of that little blip were as devastating as maybe, you know, the predictions were on real estate. But what do you think, you know, that's not necessarily the solution, but do you think that's how do you think that's gonna impact that part of the market? Because there's a lot of expensive property out there that got built
Mm-hmm.
with California. Hey, California people, come out here, you have a big tank, don't worry about it, there's a truck and all your water. I mean, there was this non-disclosure really about hauled water to people who had no idea what that was. So,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about that?
Well, I think it did provide an enormous amount of publicity for the Rio Verde area.
That's
For
true.
good or bad. A lot of people didn't even know where Rio Verde was before that, but now they're like, oh my gosh, that little
International.
section is now indicative of the entire greater Phoenix area.
Oh, no kidding.
And I think in some cases, you know, if you make enough money, you know you're gonna have water. Like, everybody's got a price. I don't know how that's going to affect that area, because that's kind of a long-term solution that, you know, it depends on whether you're confident they're gonna have a solution or
Well,
not.
true.
But the fact is that not all of Rio Verde has to rely on hauled water, so there was another feeling like everybody in
Well,
Rio
that's true.
Verde had, you know, either a well or hauled water, and that's not the case
Well, I'd
either.
have people ask me about Verde River and say, how's that going? Because they don't have water. And I go, no, they have their own deal. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
whole separate, and that's, of course, it's the Yahoo News kind of stories that just,
Yeah,
you know, blow up.
but for good or bad, now people know where it is,
Right?
right?
It's a
That's
suburb
true.
of Scottsdale.
Yeah,
I love
it's
that.
suburb of
I saw
We're in the
that.
Scottsdale.
city of Scottsdale.
Yeah,
It's like,
right?
shut up.
Right, and I think that sometimes we found that even negative publicity is a good,
Yes, it can be.
good factor. But I can say that we didn't see much of an impact on values overall in the Rio Verde area. I looked to see if they're seeing a crash in prices. Nope, no crashing happening out there. I think it was just a lot of patience.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is people who maybe thought about selling said, okay, I'm not dumping, so I'm gonna wait. You know, I think because there was less inventory too. You know, the little bit we looked, we've done a couple of markets out there, and it was like, well, there's not, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it probably ends up being a good thing. But,
Yeah, and they're like, oh, I can't go there, but you're like, but here's an area that has plenty of water.
That's right.
Next thing you know.
The house next door has a well. This one
Yeah,
doesn't.
there you
Take
go.
that one.
Yeah, we've all gotten very well educated though
Mhm.
now.
No
Wow.
pun intended.
No pun intended.
Yeah, that's
Who
right.
says you're not funny, right?
I know.
Actually,
So, as we're wrapping up a couple things, so if someone in the public wants to subscribe to the public version,
Mhm.
where do they go?
Go to CromfordReport.com and go to, well, basically the best thing to do is just email us at accounts@CromfordReport.com and say you want the public version.
Okay.
So that's for the public, and I just want to point out, it will have everything. It has new homes, it has flips, it has 55 plus communities, all that will be in there. But it is public record, so it's usually a little bit more behind than the MLS. So the MLS side of our subscription is only for real estate agent members of the MLS.
Yep.
And they have to get that through you, and that's the stuff that we update every single day.
Well, and if you're, even though people I'm talking to don't have it on my competition, educated competition is better than uneducated competition.
Mm-hmm.
So go to the Cromford Report and subscribe. It's the one subscription, seriously, that an agent should have, period. I mean,
Mhm.
the rest,
We
you know,
haven't raised our rates since 2012.
you are a deal.
There's no inflation.
CromfordReport.com. With that, thank you.
My pleasure.
You know,
Thank you
it's
for having
always a
me.
pleasure having us, and I know that we are fortunate that we were able to pry you away to do this. Because you're usually on someone's
oh my god.
Zoom or presentation, or
Mhm.
do you sleep?
Yes, in the afternoon sometimes. Usually after a couple of presentations, I might be a bit spent, so
That would do it to me,
oftentimes
suck all my energy out.
yeah, I'm losing it by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But
So, with that, we'll wrap up. This is the Good, Bad, and the Orange. We'd like you to like, subscribe, comment, share, post. I don't know, everything you possibly can do. And remember, we're sponsored by Lawyers Title, because they will legally close your house for you. David Ballinger,
legally.
thank you, and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks.